They never noticed her. For 3 years, she poured their drinks with downcast eyes, endured their mockery, faded into the background like a ghost. Even tonight was no different as the feared Yakuza boss and his men commanded the VIP section, until the fight broke out, until her uniform tore, until everyone saw what she had hidden beneath fabric and silence. The golden dragon tattoo with cherry blossom overlay, the mark reserved only for the Himura bloodline. The room fell silent as the boss rose from his seat, his face draining of color, his whisper carried across the sudden stillness. Akiko? From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story of hidden identity intrigues you, please consider subscribing for more. Rain tapped against the windows of the Midnight Lotus, the sound nearly lost beneath the steady hum of conversation and clinking glasses. Located in a narrow alley in Shinjuku's Golden Gai district, the bar occupied that perfect intersection of exclusivity and discretion, expensive enough to keep out ordinary tourists, yet understated enough that men with wealth and power could conduct business without drawing attention. Izumi Katagawa arrived through the staff entrance, shoulders hunched against the evening drizzle. At 28, she moved with the deliberate invisibility of someone who had perfected the art of not being noticed. Her black hair was pulled back into a simple bun, no loose strands to draw the eye. Her face, naturally pretty, was rendered forgettable through minimal makeup and careful avoidance of eye contact. Even her walk was designed to minimize presence, efficient, quiet, close to walls. "You're late," barked Noburo, the heavy-set manager who perpetually smelled of cigarettes and cheap cologne. He glanced at his watch with exaggerated annoyance. 2 minutes that cost me preparation time. "I apologize, Noburo-san," Izumi replied, her voice pitched perfectly to be heard, but not remembered. The trains were delayed because of the rain. He waved her excuse away with a meaty hand. "Get changed quickly, the bar's already filling up." Izumi slipped into the cramped staff room, where 2 other waitresses were applying final touches to their makeup. Unlike Izumi's plain black trousers and high-necked long-sleeve shirt, Junko and Erika wore the standard uniform, short black dresses designed to catch the eye and encourage generous tipping. "Izumi-chan, still wearing the nun's habit?" Junko laughed, adjusting her dress to better display her figure. "You know Noburo only lets you get away with it because you've been here forever. Some of us don't need to show skin to earn tips." Izumi replied with a practiced gentle smile that diffused any potential offense. Erika rolled her eyes. "Please, you earn half what we do on a good night." Izumi shrugged, neither confirming nor denying. She turned away from them, facing the corner as she changed. First came the base layer, a thin, flesh-colored compression shirt that covered her from neck to wrist. Then the uniform shirt, buttoned to the collar. She checked her appearance in the small mirror, tugging the fabric to ensure no gaps appeared when she moved. Satisfied with the coverage, she pulled her hair back tighter and prepared for another night of deliberate invisibility. The Midnight Lotus operated on clear hierarchies. Regular customers sat at the bar or at the simple tables in the main area. Those with connections and money reserved the elevated booths along the walls, where privacy screens could be adjusted according to their desire for visibility or seclusion. The true VIPs occupied the back room, separated from the main floor by carved wooden screens and a subtle security presence. Izumi's domain was the main floor and occasionally the elevated booths, but never the VIP section. This arrangement suited her perfectly. She moved through the growing crowd, taking orders, delivering drinks, wiping tables, all with quiet efficiency that invited neither conversation nor attention. "Izumi!" Noburo's sharp voice cut through her routine. She looked up to find him frantically adjusting his tie in the bar mirror. "Come here, quickly." She approached, keeping her eyes appropriately lowered. "Yes, Noburo-san?" "Tonight we have very important guests," he said, his voice hushed with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. "Himura-san himself is coming with his associates." Izumi's hands, normally steady, trembled slightly as she arranged clean glasses on a tray. "Himura-san?" "Ryusei Himura." Noburo glanced around to ensure no customers could overhear. "Make yourself scarce when they arrive. I've assigned Junko and Erika to handle the VIP section. You stay with the regular tables." She nodded, eyes still downcast to hide the relief that flooded through her. "Of course, Noburo-san." And for heaven's sake, try to be invisible if you must pass near them. Men like that don't want to be bothered by plain servers. Another nod, this one hiding a different emotion entirely. I understand perfectly. The night progressed as usual, the bar gradually filling with the standard mix of businessmen, wealthy tourists, and local regulars. Izumi moved through her duties like a ghost, present only when needed, forgotten the moment she stepped away. She had perfected this role over 3 years, and most nights it required no special effort. Tonight, however, she found herself unusually alert, her awareness extended to the door, to the security staff, to the subtle shifts in the room's atmosphere. At precisely 9 o'clock, the energy in the bar changed. Conversations quieted momentarily before resuming at a more subdued volume. The security guard at the main entrance straightened his posture. Nobuo emerged from his office, adjusting his tie yet again. A nervous smile plastered across his face. They entered without fanfare, 5 men in total. 4 wore nearly identical dark suits, their builds suggesting strength beneath the fine tailoring. They moved with the coordinated awareness of men accustomed to surveying for threats, automatically positioning themselves to control sightlines and access points. But it was the 5th man who commanded attention without seeming to seek it. Ryusei Himura stood perhaps 5'10", his frame lean but powerful. Unlike his security detail, he wore a charcoal suit that managed to appear both traditional and contemporary. His hair was cropped short on the sides but maintained a classic length on top, and though Izumi couldn't see his eyes from her position, she knew they would be assessing everything while revealing nothing. Nobuo bowed deeply, extending greetings that Himura acknowledged with the barest nod. The group was escorted directly to the VIP section, the wooden screens adjusted to provide privacy while still allowing Himura to observe the main floor if he chose. Izumi exhaled slowly, realizing she'd been holding her breath. She deliberately turned away, focusing intensely on wiping down an already clean table. "Careful there, you'll rub the finish off." The voice startled her. A middle-aged businessman watched her with amusement, clearly several drinks into his evening. She offered a polite smile. "Just ensuring everything is perfect for our customers, sir." Perfect would be another drink. Whiskey neat." He tapped his empty glass, dismissing her with the casual indifference she typically welcomed. The next hour passed in routine service. Drinks delivered, empty glasses collected, polite nods to requests both reasonable and less so. She maintained awareness of the VIP section without looking directly at it, noting when Junko or Erika disappeared behind the screens and emerged minutes later, sometimes flushed, always adjusting their clothing. "They're demanding," Junko whispered during a brief encounter at the bar. She rubbed her wrist where a red mark was beginning to form. "The one with the scar grabbed me when I tried to leave." "Did you tell Nobuo?" Izumi asked, though she already knew the answer. Junko laughed without humor. "You know what he'd say. You know who they are, just serve and stay quiet." Izumi nodded sympathetically, but offered no further comment. She had nearly finished her shift without incident when Erika approached, visibly shaken. "He's asking about the staff," she said, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" Izumi kept her voice neutral, despite the sudden acceleration of her pulse. "Himura-san, he wanted to know how long each of us has worked here, names, backgrounds." Erika shivered. It was strange, like he was interviewing us, but not for anything good. Before Izumi could respond, the front door opened to admit a group of 8 men. Unlike the regular clientele, they entered with a collective swagger that immediately changed the room's atmosphere. Their attire, expensive but flashier than the typical Midnight Lotus patron, marked them, as clearly as their behavior, the Nakamura clan, rivals to the Himura family. Izumi retreated to the bar, keeping her head down as Nobuo frantically directed the newcomers to the opposite side of the room from the VIP section. The Nakamura group took their seats with deliberate slowness, several making a point of looking toward the screened area where Himura sat. "This is bad," the bartender muttered to Izumi as he prepared their drink order. 2 families in one night, and not friendly ones. "Perhaps they don't know the other group is here," Izumi suggested, though she knew better. The bartender snorted. "Oh, they know. This is a statement. Nakamura sending his lieutenants to drink in Himura territory." As Izumi carried drinks to a table near the kitchen, one of Himura's older guards emerged from the VIP section. His gaze swept the room professionally before landing on Izumi with vague confusion. She felt his scrutiny like a physical touch and turned away, but not before she saw his brow furrow slightly, as if trying to place her face. Her sleeve caught on a bottle as she set down a customer's drink, pulling the fabric up just enough to reveal a flash of color at her wrist. She tugged it down immediately, but the guard's attention had already moved elsewhere, drawn by the increasingly loud conversation from the Nakamura group. Tension crawled across Izumi's skin as she continued her duties. The Nakamura party grew rowdier with each round, their voices pitched to carry. One of Himura's men emerged from behind the screen, took position near their table, and fixed them with a steady gaze. The message was clear: moderate your behavior. For a moment, it seemed the warning would be heeded. Then, a stocky man from the Nakamura table raised his glass. "To new territories," he called out, staring directly at the Himura guard. "And old dogs learning new tricks." Izumi moved away from their vicinity, seeking the relative safety of the bar. As she passed the VIP section, the guard who had noticed her earlier stepped into her path. She kept her eyes down, attempting to move around him. "Have we met before?" he asked, his voice rough from years of cigarettes. "I don't believe so, sir," she replied, still not meeting his gaze. "Your face," he persisted. "Something familiar." Izumi forced herself to look up, keeping her expression neutral. "I have worked here for 3 years. Perhaps you have visited before." He studied her for another uncomfortable moment before nodding slowly. "Perhaps." As he moved away, Izumi felt a cold sweat break across her back. She retreated to the storage room, checking her appearance in the small mirror kept for staff. Her uniform was secure, no hints of what lay beneath visible to casual observation. Still, she adjusted her collar higher and made certain her sleeves covered her wrists completely. A fragment of memory surfaced, young hands accepting a ceramic cup, the liquid inside catching firelight. Her father's voice speaking formal phrases nearly forgotten, the heavy silk of traditional robes against her skin. The memory dissipated as quickly as it had formed, pushed away by years of practice. When she returned to the floor, the atmosphere had deteriorated further. 2 Nakamura men stood near the bar, voices raised as they argued with a Himura guard. Noburo hovered nearby, his face a mask of poorly concealed panic. Izumi circled wide around the confrontation, continuing to serve the remaining customers who hadn't noticed or chose to ignore the building conflict. She had nearly reached the kitchen when a loud crash from behind made her turn. One of the Nakamura men had shoved the Himura guard, sending him against a table of drinks. The reaction was immediate. The wooden screens to the VIP section flew open as Himura's security team emerged, hands moving inside jackets. The Nakamura group clustered together, similarly reaching for concealed weapons. "Gentlemen!" Noburo's voice cracked as he inserted himself between the groups. "Please, this is a respectable establishment." For a tense moment, it seemed violence was inevitable. Then, a calm voice cut through the standoff. "Stand down." Ryusei Himura emerged from the VIP section, his presence commanding immediate attention. He surveyed the scene with cold detachment. "Nakamura sends children to deliver messages now?" he asked, his voice carrying easily despite its quiet tone. "Tell your Oyabun that if he wishes to discuss territory, men of respect speak directly, not through drunken proxies in bars." The Nakamura lieutenant's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Perhaps, if the great Himura-san made himself available for such discussions, other approaches wouldn't be necessary. Ryusei's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "You have delivered your message. Now leave before my men decide your disrespect requires immediate address rather than delayed consideration." The threat hung in the air, clear to everyone, despite its polite phrasing. After a moment's hesitation, the Nakamura leader nodded to his group. They began gathering their things, movements deliberately unhurried to maintain some semblance of dignity. Izumi, who had pressed herself against the wall during the confrontation, tried to make herself even smaller as the Nakamura group moved toward the exit. But as they passed near her position, chaos erupted anew. One of the drunker Nakamura men stumbled, whether genuinely or as provocation was unclear. He collided with a Himura guard, who reacted instantly, shoving the man backward. The Nakamura man crashed into his companions, who pushed back in response. Within seconds, the careful détente collapsed into shouting and shoving. Customers scrambled away from the conflict, overturning chairs and tables in their haste. Izumi tried to retreat to the kitchen, but found her path blocked by the rapidly expanding confrontation. A nearby patron, panicking, grabbed her arm to use as a shield. "Let go!" she demanded, struggling against his grip. "Protect me," he slurred, clearly too drunk to understand the danger. "They won't hurt a woman." Izumi twisted sharply, breaking his hold, but losing her balance. As she stumbled backward, her shoulder caught the edge of a table. There was a sickening sound of tearing fabric as her uniform caught on a protruding corner. Simultaneously, someone knocked into a tray of drinks, sending liquor cascading over her. Soaked and off balance, Izumi scrambled to regain her footing. Her hand went instinctively to her shoulder, feeling the torn fabric with rising horror. Before she could assess the damage, another surge in the fighting pushed combatants in her direction. She turned to flee toward the kitchen, her only thought to escape before anyone noticed her exposed skin. In her haste, she didn't see Ryusei Himura emerge from behind his security detail, surveying the chaos with growing irritation. Their eyes met across the room, a fleeting accidental connection that would have meant nothing under normal circumstances. His gaze began to move past her, dismissing her as unimportant, when something made him look again. Izumi felt the precise moment his attention shifted from her face to her exposed shoulder, where the tear in her uniform had revealed what lay beneath. Even from a distance, the distinctive gold scales of the dragon tattoo were visible, the cherry blossom overlay unmistakable in its unique design. Ryusei Himura froze. The glass he held slipped from his fingers, shattering on the floor unnoticed. His face, normally controlled to the point of impassivity, transformed through a progression of emotions: confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally something that looked remarkably like fear. Around them, the fighting continued, but for Izumi, everything narrowed to that single moment of recognition. She had spent 3 years ensuring this exact scenario never occurred, and now it unfolded in the worst possible manner, publicly, violently, with no opportunity for control or explanation. Ryusei's lips formed a word she couldn't hear over the chaos, but she knew what it was. A name she hadn't answered to in 5 years. A name that belonged to a dead woman. Akiko. He took one step toward her, then another, his security detail belatedly noticing his movement and attempting to maintain formation around him. Izumi, Akiko, backed away, clutching the torn fabric closed over her shoulder. Her mind raced through options, all bad, as the carefully constructed persona of Izumi Katagawa crumbled in real time. Before Ryusei could reach her, one of the Nakamura men crashed into his path, driven by a forceful shove from a Himura guard. The collision broke the moment of recognition, giving Akiko precious seconds to retreat. She backed toward the kitchen, still facing the room, unwilling to turn her vulnerable back toward potential witnesses. Through the swinging door, into the relative safety of stainless steel and harsh fluorescent lighting. The cook and dishwasher stared at her wet, disheveled appearance with surprise. "Izumi-san, what's happening out there?" the cook asked. "Fighting," she managed, mind still reeling. Between customer groups. She needed to leave, now, before Ryusei extracted himself from the chaos, before he sent his men to find her, before the fragile life she had built collapsed completely. But there was only one exit from the kitchen, back through the main floor or through the alley door, which would trigger an alarm without manager approval. She was trapped. A crash from the main room suggested the conflict was escalating rather than resolving. Akiko took the momentary reprieve to assess her options. Running meant abandoning 3 years of careful information gathering. Staying meant facing Ryusei Himura with no preparation, no leverage, and no protection. The kitchen door swung open violently, revealing not Ryusei, but Noburo, his face flushed with panic. "What are you doing hiding back here? Help me call the police." "The police?" Akiko repeated, momentarily disoriented by the mundane request. "Noburo-san, I don't think—" "Just do it!" he snapped, already turning back toward the chaos. "If they destroy my bar, someone's paying, Yakuza or not." As the door swung closed behind him, Akiko made her decision. Perhaps there was a third option, neither fleeing nor confronting, but controlling the inevitable meeting on her own terms. She moved to the small staff bathroom, locking the door behind her. With shaking hands, she peeled off the soaked, torn uniform shirt. In the harsh light, the tattoo that covered her back from shoulders to waist was fully revealed, an intricate golden dragon with scales that caught the light. Cherry blossoms integrated into the design in a pattern unique to her bloodline. The mark of the Himura princess, daughter of the dragon, heir to an empire built on blood and honor. She had hidden for 5 years, watching from shadows as her brother led what should have been her inheritance, gathering evidence of the betrayal that had nearly cost her life and had ultimately killed their father, learning which allies remained trustworthy and which had turned against their family. Now, with a single torn shirt, everything changed. There would be no more hiding, no more serving drinks to men who would have knelt before her in another life. For better or worse, Akiko Himura was about to return from the dead. She squared her shoulders before the mirror, watching as the posture of a servile waitress fell away, replaced by the bearing of a woman born to command respect. Even in a torn uniform, soaked with liquor, she suddenly looked like someone else entirely. A sharp knock at the door made her start. "Izumi, are you in there?" It was Erika's voice, pitched high with stress. "There are men looking for you, important men. What did you do?" Akiko closed her eyes, briefly. Too late to run then. She straightened her spine, raised her chin, and unlocked the door. It was time to face her brother. Erika's eyes widened as Akiko emerged from the bathroom. Even with the torn uniform hastily arranged to cover her shoulder, something fundamental had changed in her colleague's demeanor. The timid waitress was gone, replaced by someone who held herself with unmistakable authority. "What's happening out there?" Akiko asked, her voice carrying a crisp precision that Izumi had never used. "It's chaos," Erika replied, unconsciously straightening her posture. "The Nakamura group finally left, but Himura-san is demanding to see you. He seems... I've never seen someone look like that." "Like what?" "Like he's seen a ghost." Erika shook her head in confusion. "Izumi, what's going on? Why would Ryusei Himura care about a waitress?" Before Akiko could answer, the kitchen door swung open. Noburo stood there, his face pale with stress, flanked by one of Himura's guards, the older one who had noticed her earlier. "There you are." Noburo's voice trembled slightly. "Himura-san wishes to speak with you. Now." The guard's eyes locked on her face, then dropped to her shoulder where the torn fabric revealed just a hint of gold scales. Recognition dawned in his weathered features, followed quickly by disbelief. "It can't be," he murmured. Akiko met his gaze steadily. "Kazuo-san, you've aged." The old guard's face went through a complex series of emotions before settling into something like reverence. "Young miss," he whispered, using an honorific reserved for the daughter of his Oyabun. Noburo looked between them in confusion. "You know each other?" Neither answered him. Kazuo straightened his posture and offered a slight bow that would have seemed comically formal, directed at a waitress under any other circumstances. "Himura-san has ordered the bar cleared," he said. "He waits in the main room." Akiko nodded once, decision made. "I'll speak with him." "Izumi, what is happening?" Erika hissed as Kazuo turned to lead the way. Akiko offered her a small, genuine smile, the first Erika had ever seen from her reserved colleague. "Thank you for your kindness these past years," she said simply. "You were one of the few who showed it." With that cryptic statement, she followed Kazuo through the kitchen door, leaving Erika and Noburo staring after her in confusion. The main floor of Midnight Lotus had transformed in her brief absence. The remaining customers had been escorted out, tables righted, and broken glass cleared with remarkable efficiency. Himura's security team positioned themselves at key points around the room, faces professionally impassive despite the unusual situation. And there, in the center of the room, stood Ryusei Himura. He had removed his suit jacket in the chaos, and his white shirt gleamed under the bar lights. His posture was rigid, hands clasped behind his back as he stared at her with an intensity that would have made Izumi shrink away. But she wasn't Izumi anymore. She walked toward him with measured steps, stopping at a respectful but not submissive distance. For a long moment, neither spoke. They simply studied each other. The brother who had believed his sister dead for 5 years, and the sister who had watched her brother from shadows. "Everyone out," Ryusei finally said, his voice cutting through the silence, except Kazuo. His men exchanged glances but complied immediately, ushering a protesting Noburo through the door with them. Within seconds, only the three remained in the suddenly cavernous space. Akiko? Ryusei whispered, her name a question and a statement simultaneously. She inclined her head slightly, neither confirming nor denying. Impossible, he continued, moving closer to examine her face. You died in the fire. I identified your body myself. You identified a body, she corrected, her voice steady despite the emotion building in her chest. One similar enough to pass cursory examination, especially in the condition it was found. Ryusei circled her slowly, his eyes cataloging every detail of her appearance. That night, 5 years ago, the Osaka compound burned to the ground. Father died trying to reach your rooms. I saw the bodies myself. You saw what you were meant to see, she replied, turning to keep him in view as he circled. What everyone was meant to see. If you've been alive all this time, Ryusei's voice hardened, why hide? Why let your family mourn you? Why let me hunt ghosts for 5 years seeking revenge for your murder? The question hung between them, heavy with 5 years of grief and rage. Kazuo, standing silently by the door, watched with the careful neutrality of a man who had served the Himura family through decades of storms. Because I wasn't certain who to trust, Akiko finally said. The fire wasn't set by the Nakamura clan, despite the evidence planted to suggest it. Ryusei stopped his circling, facing her directly. Explain. The attack was orchestrated from within our own ranks, someone who knew the compound's security protocols, who could access Father's quarters, who understood exactly when to strike. Her voice remained calm, but her eyes blazed. Someone who has spent the last 5 years whispering in your ear, directing your revenge toward innocent rivals while consolidating his own power. Understanding dawned on Ryusei's face. Masato, your trusted advisor, Father's closest confidant. She spat the words like poison. The man who knew that Father had chosen me as successor despite tradition. Ryusei flinched slightly at this confirmation of what he had long suspected, that their father had intended to break with generations of tradition by naming his daughter heir instead of his son. Not because Ryusei was incapable, but because Akiko had inherited their father's strategic mind in ways Ryusei never had. Show me, he demanded suddenly. Show me proof that you are who you claim. Akiko held his gaze for a long moment before turning her back to him. With deliberate movements, she pulled aside the torn fabric of her uniform, revealing more of the tattoo that had first triggered his recognition. Ryusei stepped closer, his breath catching as the golden dragon scales caught the light. The distinctive pattern was one he knew intimately. He bore a similar dragon across his own back, as did every Himura heir. But where his was rendered in traditional black ink, hers incorporated the golden scales that marked the primary bloodline. And woven throughout the design, unique to her alone, were delicate cherry blossoms, honoring her mother's imperial connection, a lineage that had cemented the Himura clan's position above all rivals. The cherry blossoms, he murmured. Only you carried that mark. Only I was permitted to carry it, she corrected, by Father's decree. From his position by the door, Kazuo cleared his throat. It is her, young master. I would stake my life on it. Those eyes, they are Takashi-sama's eyes, exactly. Ryusei continued to stare at the tattoo, processing the implications of his sister's return from the dead. If what you say about Masato is true, we have been pursuing the wrong enemies for 5 years. While the real traitor consolidated power at your right hand, Akiko confirmed, adjusting her clothing to cover the tattoo once more. I needed time to gather evidence, to understand the full scope of his betrayal. I couldn't risk approaching you directly until I was certain. And are you certain now? I have documented financial transactions linking Masato to the mercenaries who set the fire. I have witness testimony from staff who saw him leaving Father's quarters minutes before the alarm sounded. I have proof that he has been skimming clan resources while directing your attention toward fabricated threats. Ryusei's expression darkened with each revelation. And you gathered this evidence while serving drinks in a bar frequented by our associates? Hide in plain sight, Akiko said with a slight shrug. The Midnight Lotus became a favorite meeting place for clan business after you acquired interests in this district. Men speak freely in front of servers they consider invisible, particularly plain, forgettable ones. For the first time, a hint of admiration flickered across Ryusei's face. Clever. Father always said your mind was your greatest weapon. The compliment hung awkwardly between them, a reminder of the complicated relationship they had shared before her death. Siblings who respected but rarely understood each other, bound by blood and duty rather than natural affection. What happens now? Ryusei asked, his posture shifting subtly from confrontational to considering. Before Akiko could answer, the main door opened to admit one of Ryusei's guards. Sir, apologies for the interruption, but Masato-san has arrived. He received the word of the incident and came immediately. The siblings exchanged a charged look, an entire conversation contained in that brief connection. Tell him I'll speak with him shortly, Ryusei replied smoothly. Have him wait in my car. After the guard departed, Ryusei turned back to his sister. It seems we must make decisions quickly. If what you say is true, I've been harboring a viper in our family's bosom for 5 years. And if I'm lying, Akiko challenged, what then? Ryusei studied her for a long moment. You always were a terrible liar, little sister. Even as children, your eyes gave you away. He smiled faintly. They still do? With deliberate movements, Ryusei lowered himself to one knee before her, head bowed in the formal posture of fealty, traditionally offered to the head of the Himura clan. Akiko Himura, daughter of the dragon, rightful leader of our clan. The gesture, so unexpected and profound, momentarily stole Akiko's breath. Kazuo immediately followed suit, dropping to one knee with fluid grace despite his age. Rise, she managed after collecting herself. This is neither the time nor place for such formalities. Ryusei stood, a new determination in his bearing. What would you have me do about Masato? For now, nothing that would alert him, Akiko advised. Return to your normal routine. I need perhaps 2 more days to secure the final evidence against him. And where will you go? You can hardly return to serving drinks after tonight. Akiko considered the question. Her small apartment would no longer be safe once Masato inevitably discovered something had changed. The carefully constructed identity of Izumi Katagawa had served its purpose but was now compromised beyond recovery. I have a safe house in Meguro, she finally said. Kazuo knows the location. The old guard nodded in confirmation. I can arrange secure transport, young miss. Do so, Ryusei ordered before turning back to Akiko. In 2 days, then. We will meet at the family compound in Roppongi. Masato typically attends business meetings in Yokohama on Wednesday evenings. We can speak freely then. Akiko nodded her agreement, recognizing the strategic soundness of the plan. As she moved toward the back exit where Kazuo had gone to arrange transportation, Ryusei's voice stopped her. Akiko, he said, softer than before. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Did you truly believe I might be complicit in Father's death? She turned back to face him, weighing her words carefully. I didn't know what to believe. Masato has been whispering in your ear for 5 years, positioning himself as your trusted advisor, turning you against potential allies. I needed to be certain where your loyalties truly lay. And now I know you are still my brother, she said simply. Despite everything. A complex series of emotions crossed Ryusei's face. Grief, relief, determination. When this is finished, we have much to discuss about the future of our clan. Yes, she agreed. We do. 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and strategizing. Akiko's safe house, a modest apartment registered under a different alias, provided temporary security, while she coordinated with Kazuo to move the accumulated evidence to a secure location. 5 years of meticulous documentation, witness statements recorded without their knowledge, financial records obtained through means best not examined too closely, all painting a damning picture of Masato's betrayal. On Wednesday evening, Kazuo arrived in an unmarked car to transport her to the family compound. Akiko had discarded the plain clothing and submissive posture of Izumi Katagawa. Instead, she wore a simply cut black suit that conveyed authority without ostentation. Her hair, freed from its severe bun, was arranged in a modern style that framed her face elegantly. As they approached the gates of the compound, memories flooded back. Childhood games in the traditional gardens, stern lessons in the family dojo, quiet tea ceremonies with her father while he explained the responsibilities that would one day be hers. The compound had been rebuilt after the fire, but it followed the original layout exactly, a physical manifestation of the Himura clan's resilience. Security personnel bowed deeply as her car passed, word of her return having spread through trusted channels. By the time she reached the main house, a small contingent of longtime family retainers had gathered to witness what many considered a miracle, the return of the Himura princess from death itself. Ryusei waited at the entrance, dressed in traditional kimono bearing the family crest. Without a word, he led her through familiar corridors to their father's former study, now his, but soon perhaps hers. The room had been prepared for an important meeting. Cushions arranged in the traditional manner, documentation laid out with precise attention to protocol, witnesses positioned according to rank and significance. 4 clan elders, men who had served their father and grandfather before him, knelt in formal posture, their expressions carefully neutral, despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Brothers of the council," Ryusei announced formally, "I present to you Akiko Himura, daughter of Takashi Himura, sister of the dragon, returned to us after 5 years." The elders maintained their composure admirably, though one elderly man failed to completely suppress a gasp of shock. Akiko bowed with precise formality before taking her place at the position of honor, a seat that would traditionally be occupied by the clan head. "Forgive an old man's doubt," said the eldest counselor, "but we buried Akiko Himura 5 years ago. What proof can you offer of your identity?" Without hesitation, Akiko removed her suit jacket and turned, allowing the council to see the golden dragon tattoo across her back, visible through the thin silk of her blouse. "The marking is convincing," admitted another elder, "but tattoos can be replicated by skilled artists." "Can this?" Akiko asked, facing them once more. From within her pocket, she withdrew a small object, a jade seal carved with the personal crest of Takashi Himura, given to her on her 20th birthday with strict instructions to guard it with her life. The elders leaned forward to examine it, expressions shifting from skepticism to wonder. The seal was unmistakable, its authenticity beyond question. "How did you survive the fire?" asked the third elder. "I was never in my quarters that night," Akiko explained, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "I had received a warning, anonymous but compelling, that an attempt would be made on my life. I was in the process of alerting security when the explosions began." "Yet you did not reveal yourself afterward," the first elder noted. "You allowed your family to mourn, your brother to lead vengeance campaigns against innocent clans." "Not innocent," she corrected firmly, "but also not responsible for that particular crime. I needed time to identify the true culprit and gather evidence that would withstand challenge, even from those with significant power within our organization." At Ryusei's nod, Kazuo distributed folders containing the evidence she had accumulated over 5 years. The elders reviewed the documents with increasing gravity, occasionally exchanging glances as particularly damning revelations came to light. "Masato," murmured the eldest, his voice heavy with betrayal. "We trusted him completely." "As did my father," Akiko replied, "which gave him perfect opportunity to orchestrate the attack. He knew the compound's weaknesses, the guard rotation, my father's habits. And he knew that father intended to name me as successor, breaking with tradition." She didn't look at Ryusei as she said this, sparing him the public acknowledgement that their father had passed him over despite his years of loyal service. It was an old wound that would need to be addressed between them privately. "These documents present a compelling case," the second elder acknowledged. "But why now? Why reveal yourself after 5 years of hiding?" "It was not my intention," Akiko admitted. "An accident exposed my identity before I was fully prepared. But perhaps it is time. The clan has suffered enough from misdirected vengeance and internal corruption." The elders conferred quietly among themselves before the eldest spoke again. "If what these documents show is true, Masato has committed the gravest betrayal possible against the Himura family. The traditional punishment would be death," Ryusei finished. "But first, we require confession. Confirmation from his own lips of what these papers tell us." "He arrives tomorrow from Yokohama," Kazuo informed them, "believing he comes to a standard report meeting. Then tomorrow we will have justice," the eldest elder declared, "if the council accepts the evidence and testimony presented." One by one, the elders stamped the formal document acknowledging Akiko's identity and the charges against Masato. As the final seal was pressed into the red ink, a weight seemed to lift from the room, the first step toward rectifying 5 years of misdirection and hidden truths. After the elders departed, Akiko and Ryusei remained alone in their father's study. The formality that had characterized their interactions since her revelation gradually faded, leaving two siblings facing an uncertain future together. "You could have approached me sooner," Ryusei said, breaking the silence. "I would have helped you." "Masato rarely left your side," she replied. "His network of informants extended throughout the clan. Any premature move would have alerted him before I had sufficient evidence." Ryusei nodded reluctantly, acknowledging the logic even as he struggled with the emotional implications. "For 5 years, I've directed our resources toward destroying the Nakamura clan, believing they killed you and father, blood feuds that can never be undone, based on a lie. The Nakamura are not innocent in other matters," Akiko reminded him. "But yes, in this specific case, they were convenient scapegoats." "And what happens after tomorrow?" Ryusei asked, the question that had hung between them since her reappearance finally voiced. "Father named you heir, not me. The council has now acknowledged your identity. By tradition, leadership should pass to you." The statement was made without inflection, but Akiko heard the complex emotions beneath it. Duty, resignation, perhaps a touch of relief mixed with apprehension. "5 years ago, I was prepared to assume leadership," she acknowledged. "Father had trained me specifically for that role. But you have led the clan through difficult times since then. The transition would not be simple. The clan would follow you," Ryusei said simply. "Many of the older members always believed you had father's mind for strategy. The younger ones would adapt quickly enough once they witnessed your capabilities." Akiko studied her brother's face, searching for signs of resentment or ambition. She found only tired acceptance, a man prepared to fulfill his duty, whatever it might be. "We have time to determine the future structure of leadership," she said carefully. "First, we must address the cancer that has grown within our organization. Masato's corruption extends beyond his personal betrayal. He has positioned loyalists throughout our operations." Ryusei nodded, professional focus replacing personal concerns. "I've already begun quiet investigations into his closest associates. Several discrepancies have emerged in their accounts and activities." "Good." Akiko moved toward the window, looking out at the garden their father had so carefully tended. "When this is finished, the Himura clan will need to rebuild more than just its physical compound. Trust has been broken, alliances damaged, resources misdirected. Together," Ryusei said quietly, "we might accomplish what neither could do alone." Akiko turned back to face him, a small smile softening her features. "Father always said we were two halves of an ideal leader. Your strength and presence, my strategy and insight." He was not often wrong about such things. The siblings shared a moment of understanding, not quite warmth, but a recognition of shared purpose that might, with time, grow into something more. A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. Kazuo entered with a respectful bow. "Preparations are complete for tomorrow's meeting. Security has been arranged according to your specifications." "Thank you, Kazuo," Ryusei acknowledged. "Please ensure my sister's quarters are prepared. The cherry blossom suite has been maintained as she left it." Akiko felt a rush of emotion at this revelation, that her brother had preserved her living space exactly as it was, a shrine to a sister he believed dead. Perhaps there was more to rebuild between them than she had dared hope. "Tomorrow," she said with quiet determination, "the truth finally emerges from shadow." Morning light filtered through the cherry trees surrounding the Himura compound, casting dappled shadows across the immaculate stone pathways. Akiko knelt in the small private garden adjoining her suite, the same space where she had often found solace as a young woman. After 5 years of tiny apartments and constant vigilance, the familiar scent of moss and cherry blossoms brought a sense of homecoming she hadn't expected to feel again. The traditional clothing laid out for her that morning represented another return, formal black kimono bearing the Himura crest, the fabric finer than anything Izumi Katagawa had worn in her years of hiding. As she slipped into the silken layers with practiced movements, muscle memory returned from her previous life. A soft knock at the door preceded Kazuo's entrance. The old guard bowed deeply, his weathered face betraying unusual emotion. "Young miss, the council has assembled in the main hall. Masato has arrived for his meeting with Ryusei-san and waits in the reception room. Does he suspect anything? Akiko asked, adjusting the final layer of her kimono. He appears at ease, Kazuo replied, though he expressed surprise at the formal nature of today's gathering. Akiko nodded, satisfaction settling into her bones. 5 years of patience, of invisibility, of gathering evidence while serving drinks to men who would have killed her had they known her identity, all culminating in this morning's confrontation. And my brother awaits your signal to begin. This simple statement carried immense significance, acknowledgement that despite his years of leadership, Ryusei had willingly ceded control of this moment to her, a gesture of respect that spoke volumes about the changes already occurring in the clan's power structure. Akiko followed Kazuo through the compound's polished corridors. Household staff lined the route, bowing deeply as she passed. Many faces she recognized from before, now aged by 5 years and openly showing amazement at her return. The whispers that had begun yesterday had clearly spread throughout the organization overnight. By noon, the news would reach their allies and enemies alike. The Himura princess lived. The main hall had been arranged for a formal council meeting. The 4 elders knelt in their positions of authority, flanked by trusted lieutenants. Ryusei waited near the head position, dressed in formal attire that mirrored her own. When she entered, every person in the room bowed in synchronized respect, a sea of black-clad figures acknowledging her presence with a reverence that would have been unimaginable at the Midnight Lotus just days ago. Akiko Himura, announced the eldest council member, his voice carrying despite his advanced age. Daughter of Takashi Himura, heir to the Golden Dragon legacy, we welcome your return to your rightful place. She inclined her head in acknowledgement, taking the seat that had once been her father's. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone present. This positioning clearly established the shift in power that was occurring. Ryusei knelt at her right hand, his expression serene, despite what must have been the complex emotions beneath. Brothers of the council, Akiko began, her voice carrying the formal cadence that Izumi had never used. Today we address a cancer that has grown within our family for 5 years. A betrayal that took my father's life, fractured our alliances, and misdirected our vengeance. At her nod, Kazuo moved to the side door and spoke quietly to the guards positioned there. Moments later, Masato entered the room. At 53, Masato Oshiro cut an impressive figure. Distinguished gray touched his temples, lending gravity to his appearance without suggesting weakness. His tailored suit represented the modern face of the Himura organization, corporate, sophisticated, far removed from the cruder Yakuza stereotypes of previous generations. He had served as their father's advisor for over 20 years and had seamlessly transferred that loyalty to Ryusei after the fire, or so it had appeared. His confident stride faltered when he caught sight of Akiko seated in the position of authority. Confusion crossed his features, followed by disbelief, and then, most tellingly, a flicker of fear quickly suppressed. "What performance is this?" he demanded, looking to Ryusei for explanation. Ryusei's face remained impassive. "This is no performance, Masato-san. My sister has returned to us, after 5 years believed dead." Masato's recovery was impressive, his features smoothing into an expression of cautious wonder. A miracle indeed, if true. He turned to Akiko, offering a bow that managed to convey both respect and skepticism. "You understand my caution, of course. We buried Akiko Himura. We mourned her. And now this unexpected resurrection occurs." "Your caution is noted," Akiko replied coolly. "Though I find it interesting that your first response is suspicion rather than joy at my survival." A subtle tension rippled through the room. Masato's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind visibly working through implications and potential responses. "Forgiveness, Himura-san," he said, adopting a more conciliatory tone. "The shock overwhelmed proper protocol. Of course, the family rejoices at your return if your identity is confirmed." "The council has already verified her identity," the eldest member stated flatly. "The jade seal of Takashi Himura does not lie, nor does the specific pattern of her family markings." Masato bowed again, this time more deeply. "Then I too welcome your return, Akiko-sama. Though I confess curiosity about where you have been these 5 years, and why you allowed your family to believe you dead." A reasonable question, Akiko acknowledged. I have been gathering evidence, Masato-san. Evidence concerning the events of the night my father died. The subtle shift in Masato's posture would have been imperceptible to most, but Akiko had spent years learning to read the smallest tells in men's behavior. The nearly invisible tensing of shoulders, the fractional narrowing of eyes, signs of a predator suddenly aware it might become prey. Evidence, he repeated, voice perfectly controlled. What sort of evidence? At Akiko's gesture, Ryusei slid a folder across the polished floor. It stopped precisely at Masato's knees. Financial records, Akiko explained as Masato reluctantly opened the folder. Specifically, 3 payments made to a mercenary group known for arson operations. Payments traced to an offshore account under the name Maida Consulting. I fail to see the relevance, Masato said, barely glancing at the documents. Maida Consulting is a shell company established under your wife's maiden name, Ryusei supplied. Our financial team has confirmed the connection conclusively. A second folder followed the first. Witness testimony from staff members who observed you entering my father's quarters shortly before the fire began. Statements confirming you removed documents from his safe, specifically, his updated will naming me as his successor. Masato's composure began to show cracks. His fingers tightened on the edges of the folder. And finally, Akiko continued, as a third folder was presented, communications between you and the Nakamura clan in the weeks following the fire. Not communications seeking revenge, as would be expected, but rather assurances that the Himura clan would not seek retribution for actions the Nakamura never committed. The council elders murmured their disapproval, eyes hardening as they regarded the man who had served as trusted advisor for decades. These documents could be falsified, Masato said, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. A conspiracy to discredit me, perhaps orchestrated by our enemies. Possibly, Akiko conceded, which is why we've invited someone else to join our discussion. She nodded toward Kazuo, who opened a side door to admit a middle-aged woman in conservative business attire. You remember Yukiko Tanaka? Father's personal secretary for 15 years. Masato's face drained of color as the woman bowed respectfully to the council before taking a seat. Tanaka-san, Akiko addressed her gently. Please tell the council what you witnessed on the night of the fire. Yukiko's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady. I was working late that evening, organizing documents for Takashi-sama's morning meetings. Masato-san entered the study without knocking, unusual as he typically observed formal protocols with the Oyabun. The room was utterly silent as she continued. They argued about succession plans. Takashi-sama had finalized his decision to name Akiko-sama as his heir. Masato-san was vehemently opposed, citing tradition and concerns about allies' reactions to female leadership. Masato's jaw clenched visibly. This is absurd. A secretary's misremembered conversation from 5 years ago proves nothing. When Takashi-sama dismissed him, Yukiko continued as if he hadn't spoken. Masato-san said something I found strange at the time. By morning, circumstances may force reconsideration. Less than 3 hours later, the fire began in the East Wing, where Akiko-sama's quarters were located. Ryusei leaned forward. Why have you never shared this information before, Tanaka-san? Yukiko bowed her head. After the fire, Masato-san was appointed interim security chief. He made it clear that speculating about the fire's origin would be viewed as disloyalty during a crisis period. When you assumed leadership, Ryusei-sama, he remained your closest advisor. I feared for my safety and my family's. The pieces aligned perfectly with the evidence Akiko had spent years accumulating. She watched Masato's face as he calculated options, considered lies, and finally recognized the completeness of his exposure. What would you have done? He suddenly demanded, abandoning pretense. His gaze locked on Ryusei rather than Akiko. Accept a woman as head of the Himura clan? Allow our allies to perceive us as weak, breaking with centuries of tradition? Your father's judgment was compromised by his affection for his daughter. So you arranged his death, Ryusei said flatly, along with what you believed was my sister's. I arranged for necessary transition, Masato corrected, a hint of his true arrogance emerging. The fire was meant to eliminate only her, with evidence pointing to Nakamura involvement. Your father's death was unfortunate but unavoidable once he attempted to reach her quarters. The clinical way he described the murder of the man who had trusted him implicitly sent a wave of controlled rage through Akiko. She maintained her composure with effort, knowing that justice required clear heads rather than emotional outbursts. "For 5 years," she said quietly, "you directed my brother's rage toward innocent rivals. You consolidated power, embedded loyal followers throughout our organization, and systematically weakened alliances that might have questioned your influence." "I protected this family's interests," Masato insisted. "The Himura clan maintains its position of strength because of my guidance." "Interesting perspective from the architect of our greatest betrayal," the eldest council member observed coldly. Masato's eyes darted around the room, finally accepting that he would find no defenders among those present. With surprising speed for a man his age, he reached within his jacket. Akiko had anticipated this moment. At her earlier instruction, security had been positioned strategically throughout the room. Before Masato could fully extract what was undoubtedly a concealed weapon, 2 guards restrained him with practiced efficiency. A small pistol clattered to the floor. "Even now, you choose betrayal," Ryusei said, his voice heavy with disgust. "You would shed blood in the council chamber itself." Masato struggled briefly before recognizing the futility of resistance. His expression hardened into contempt. "The Himura clan will weaken under female leadership. Our rivals will perceive it as modernization at first, then recognize it for what it truly is, a failure of resolve. I acted to prevent that decline. Yet here we stand," Akiko replied calmly. "The sister you tried to murder now sits in the position you killed to prevent. My brother, whom you manipulated for 5 years, stands united with me. The council acknowledges my right to leadership." She allowed herself a small, cold smile. "Your betrayal has achieved precisely the outcome you sought to avoid." The eldest council member cleared his throat. "The traditional penalty for betrayal of this magnitude is death." Masato's face remained defiant despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "Then do what tradition demands. I regret only failure, not intent." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Akiko. As the wrong party and now acknowledged clan leader, the decision regarding punishment fell to her. Traditional Yakuza code demanded blood for such a betrayal, a swift execution that would close this chapter definitively. Akiko rose to her feet, the formal kimono lending her movement a ceremonial gravity. "Death would be easy," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Living with your failure is your punishment." Confusion crossed Masato's face. "What?" "You will not have the honor of dying as a Himura affiliate," she continued. "Instead, you will be stripped of rank, position, and association. Your assets will be seized. Your tattoos will be removed." A collective intake of breath followed her pronouncement. Removal of Yakuza tattoos was a punishment worse than death for many. A physical and spiritual severing from the organization that had defined one's existence. "You will live," Akiko continued, "watching from the outside as I lead the Himura clan into prosperity. Every success we achieve will be your failure compounded. Every alliance we strengthen will be testament to your error in judgment." She moved closer, her voice dropping so that only Masato could hear her final words. "And you will live, knowing that the woman you tried to erase now holds the power to end your existence with a single word, yet chooses to let you suffer the knowledge of your complete defeat instead." Turning back to the council, she resumed her formal tone. "Remove him from our presence. Begin the ritual of expulsion immediately." As guards led the shell-shocked Masato from the chamber, the council elders exchanged glances of approval. Her choice of punishment demonstrated both strength and strategic thinking. Death would have created a martyr for any remaining loyalists, while this public humiliation would ensure Masato posed no future threat to the clan. The eldest council member bowed deeply. "The council recognizes the wisdom of your judgment, Akiko-sama. Your father would be proud." The formal meeting concluded shortly after, transitioning to practical discussions about identifying Masato's network of loyalists and beginning the process of correcting the misdirection of the past 5 years. As clan members dispersed to their various responsibilities, Akiko and Ryusei remained in the council chamber. "Mercy was unexpected," Ryusei observed once they were alone. "Not mercy," Akiko corrected. "Strategy. His suffering will be more instructive to potential traitors than a quick death. Ryusei nodded slowly. Father was right about you. You see 3 moves ahead where others see only the immediate path. The complement hung between them, bridging some of the distance that 5 years of separation had created. For a moment, they were simply brother and sister again, rather than rival claimants to their father's legacy. The clan will need restructuring, Akiko said, turning toward practical matters. Masato's influence runs deep. Already underway, Ryusei confirmed. I've ordered comprehensive audits of all operations, with trusted teams who predate his ascension. And the Nakamura clan, the others we've treated as enemies based on his manipulations? Ryusei's expression tightened. That presents more complex challenges. Blood has been shed, vengeance taken for wrongs they didn't commit. Reconciliation may not be possible in some cases. Then we start with those where it is possible, Akiko decided, beginning with formal acknowledgement of our error regarding the fire. The siblings spent hours reviewing operations, identifying priorities, and developing plans to transition leadership smoothly. By late afternoon, the foundation had been laid for the clan's transformation under Akiko's direction. 3 months later, the Midnight Lotus looked nothing like the bar where Izumi, Katagawa, had once served drinks to oblivious patrons. Renovated with subtle elegance, it had transformed into a legitimate business, serving as the public face of several Himura enterprises. The private VIP room remained but now hosted business meetings rather than darker transactions. Akiko entered through the front door rather than the staff entrance, her tailored business suit reflecting her new public role as CEO of the Himura Group's hospitality division. The staff bowed respectfully as she passed, including Noburo, the former manager who now reported directly to her, his previous arrogance replaced by nervous deference. Quarterly reports are prepared for your review, Himura-sama, he said, offering a folder with slightly trembling hands. Thank you, Noburo-san, she replied, accepting it with the grace of someone who no longer needed to prove her authority. How are the new staff policies working out? Very well, he assured her quickly. Employee satisfaction has improved significantly since implementing your suggested changes. Akiko nodded, taking a moment to acknowledge other staff members individually. Junko and Erika stood near the bar, bowing deeply as she approached. Both had been retained during the transition, their shock at discovering their plain colleague's true identity, having transformed into something approaching awe. Himura-sama, Erika greeted her. The special reservation has been arranged as requested. Excellent, Akiko replied. Please ensure privacy protocols are observed. As she moved toward what had once been the VIP section, a customer entering the establishment stopped abruptly, recognition dawning on his face. It was the drunk patron who had grabbed her during the fight months earlier, inadvertently exposing her identity. You, he managed, clearly uncomfortable. I never had the chance to apologize for my behavior that night. Akiko studied him for a moment, noting his sobriety and genuine contrition. Apology accepted, Tanaka-san, though perhaps you might consider respecting service staff, regardless of their perceived status in the future. He bowed deeply, relief evident in his posture. Of course, Himura-sama. Thank you for your graciousness. With a small nod of acknowledgement, she continued to the private room where Ryusei waited. Their relationship had evolved over the past months. Not quite the easy camaraderie some siblings shared, but a respectful partnership that leveraged their complementary strengths. The Nakamura representatives have agreed to meet next week, Ryusei informed her as she took a seat opposite him. They remain skeptical, but are willing to discuss new terms given the evidence we've provided about Masato's manipulations. Progress, Akiko noted with satisfaction, and the transition of our less legitimate operations? Proceeding according to your timeline, the security contracts and property management divisions are now fully legitimate. The protection services are being restructured as we discussed. Their conversation continued as staff served traditional tea with the precise formality befitting the Himura siblings. The balance they had struck, Akiko as the acknowledged clan head, making strategic decisions, Ryusei handling day-to-day operations and enforcement, had proven more effective than either could have achieved alone. Later that evening, after business matters were concluded, Akiko visited a small shrine established in the compound's garden. Her father's memorial tablet stood in the central position, surrounded by offerings and incense. She knelt before it, placing a small bundle beside the incense holder. The plain black uniform she had worn as Izumi Katagawa, folded with precise care. "I stayed invisible to honor your memory," she said softly to her father's spirit, "to uncover the truth of your death and bring justice to your betrayer. Now, I will lead visibly to restore your legacy." The cherry trees surrounding the shrine rustled in the evening breeze, petals drifting down to settle on the memorial and the uniform beside it. 5 years of hiding, of serving drinks to men who never truly saw her, had culminated in this moment of restoration. The invisible waitress had fulfilled her purpose, allowing Akiko Himura to reclaim her rightful place. As she rose to leave, she caught sight of her reflection in the shrine's polished surface, no longer hunched to appear smaller, no longer averting her eyes to avoid notice. The woman who gazed back stood straight, her gaze direct and confident, bearing the unmistakable presence of the Himura princess, daughter of the dragon, leader of her clan. The dragon tattoo hidden beneath her clothing no longer represented a dangerous secret, but rather a proud declaration of identity and purpose. What had once made her vulnerable now made her powerful. The marking that had forced her into hiding had ultimately become the irrefutable proof that restored her to her rightful place. Akiko stepped back onto the path leading to the main compound, where clan members waited for her guidance, allies sought her partnership, and rivals reassessed their positions in light of her unexpected return. The future stretched before her, complex but full of potential for rebuilding what betrayal had damaged. The Cherry Blossom Princess had returned to take her throne, proving that true power could hide in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to emerge from shadow into light.